Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property investing. Welcome to the couch, mate.
G'day, how you going?
Very, very good. Hey,
Where'd you go?
Went to Coldplay.
Oh.
Mate, how good is Coldplay?
How good are they?
Mate.
They are amazing.
They are amazing.
I saw them a few years ago and Jane dragged me along and I'm like, really? Like, what am I going to do? Sit there at Rod Laver Arena? Mate, it was incredible.
Oh.
Absolutely. The energy, the light, just amazing.
Mate, they do an incredible light show. The last concert I went to was at Telstra, and it was, remember when Etihad was Telstra?
Yeah.
What was it, Telstra Dome?
Telstra Dome.
And then you got Telstra Stadium.
Yeah.
My wife booked the tickets for Telstra Stadium, thinking it was the Telstra Dome.
Ah.
So we booked these tickets for Sydney to go to the U2 concert, so we had to jump on a plane and go. So, but anyway, anyone who has been, but enough of that. We got a very special guest on episode 94 today
94
of the Property Couch.
Summer series.
Well, no, it's mate.
Oh, it's a summer.
Yeah, well,
it's summer.
Fair enough.
It's first pass for summer series for me.
Summer series is more the January, but Nerida Conisbee. Did I get that right, Nerida?
You did, yes.
Nerida Conisbee is the chief economist for the REA Group and is one of Australia's leading property market experts. Nerida provides regular commentary for Sky News and a wide range of Australian media outlets, including digital, print, television, and radio. Welcome, Nerida.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're a
today.
busy woman.
I am busy.
Commenting on all those things.
Now, Melbourne girl,
I am Melbourne.
but live in Sydney now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Melbourne.
Yep.
Left about 18 months ago.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
now living
yeah.
in Sydney.
How do they treat you, the Sydney siders?
Yeah, they're quite different.
Yeah.
They're a little
In a
bit more,
nice
in a
sort of
nice
way,
way. But
yeah.
yeah, having grown up in Melbourne, it is a bit of a culture shock.
Are you
not too bad.
getting used to the sun in Sydney?
Yeah, the sun and the brighter colours
And the
everyone's
curlier
into
hair
the
with a
curly
little bit of that. Yeah.
Everyone's really fit and healthy and
Yeah.
But they just don't get the AFL football up there. And it's like they...
No, they kind of do. Like they're starting to get into
Yeah,
it.
Sydney and GWS are doing all right. But,
Yeah.
who do you follow?
I don't really follow footy.
Oh,
that
yeah,
much.
okay, let's wrap this one up now.
I know. Especially coming from Melbourne.
There's
But,
50%
my
of our
family
audience
were,
going, yes, no footy chat.
No, my family were Fitzroy, and then we kind of faded
fell
out
away.
after that.
Okay.
So
The Roy boys.
yeah.
That's true.
No, very good. Well, chief economist at the REA Group. That's very, very prestigious. How did that all come about?
So I was working for Colliers as their head of research, and I had that role for about 6 years. And REA approached me about a year ago and said, we've got this role, would really like you to do it. And it was a big decision. I mean, obviously moving from a very stable job at Colliers to a new role was, a bit of a tough decision to make, but it's been great. So really loving being at REA Group. It's very exciting.
Great
they're
culture.
growing very
Yes.
fast.
Yeah.
We are now the biggest digital real estate company in the world. So it's
Double the traffic.
yeah,
If you
double
read
the
the
traffic.
billboard.
That's right. You do read the billboard. That's good to know.
Yeah, the marketers are happy. Tick that box.
Yes, I have to tell the team.
Apparently, if you're not on realestate.com, you're not in the market.
That's right, you really aren't.
Gee, Bryce,
No,
you've got any more of that gold? wait. Cut us a check, send it our way. It's called the Property Couch.
This is not cash for comment. I'm just, realestate.com are obviously the leading portal in Australia. So,
yes.
But I guess lots of this type of opportunity exists for you where you've got to travel around talking about how you see the market. Have you, surprised by what 2016 has done? Here we are in December. Whereas at the beginning of January, maybe we didn't expect it to perform as strongly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely has performed far better than I think anyone expected. In Melbourne and Sydney, primarily.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of the country is doing it quite differently. But 10% growth in Melbourne, 12% growth in Sydney. Will it continue? I don't know. I think there's a lot of uncertainty now in the market, and I think we'll continue to see the cities grow in price, but probably not quite at that level next year.
Mm-hmm. How do you reconcile the fact that there's well over 1,000 people each and every week moving into the two big majors, and so logic suggests that those two markets can't continue to go up and up and up and up forever? However, the fact that there's not enough stock and there's so many people coming, certainly that's going to still put upward pressure on prices. It's actually a hard one to read, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, and I think it's that the lack of stock is really a Sydney problem. Sydney has been undersupplying housing now for decades. Finally, I think this year they caught up to Melbourne. They're developing about the same amount of housing as Melbourne. But, that's after decades of developing far, far less. So I think Melbourne kind of gets it right. Like Melbourne with apartments, maybe it's developing too many apartments in the wrong spots. But overall, Melbourne has been kept far more affordable than Sydney because of that supply. I think it's really good, though, for economic growth, and I think Melbourne will outperform Sydney in the longer term if Sydney doesn't get that housing affordability and that housing supply right.
So, obviously, Melbourne hasn't adopted the whole apartment living yet. If we actually have a look at the data that comes out of RP data as an example, which I know you guys have a relationship with, back in, I think it was 1994, there was more apartments that were being built than freestanding houses. And now we've only ticked over that in 2011. So we're sort of playing a bit of catch up in terms of people still wanting to get close. And I think that has a lot to do with Sydney's congestion story. They had shocking congestion, always have. The Sydney Olympics obviously allowed better access and that improved their sort of flow of traffic. But, we as Melburnians, we're just not there yet, are we?
No, we're not there yet. I mean, it's interesting talking to, even people in the office and, we're talking about first home buyers and, a lot of them still want a house.
Yeah.
And in Melbourne, it kind of is, you can probably still do that as a first home buyer.
Yep.
But talking to Sydney people, there's no expectation of a house.
No.
And, if they want a house, they move Central Coast or they move far in the outer west into a house and land package.
Yeah.
But, it's, most white-collar workers are buying apartments and it is much better accepted.
So I've been talking of late around this whole immaturity in the Australian property market around, we look at London, we look at New York, we look at all these big cities and we don't argue about affordability there because we almost just accept that these big international cities are expensive to live in, yet we don't look at our own backyard in the same light. I think there's an argument to that. Yet, what you've just said validates what we're talking about because Sydney people, this next generation have accepted that apartment living is part of what they do, whereas we're not quite there yet in Melbourne, are we?
No, we're not there. I mean, it is interesting now with so much development occurring in the CBD of Melbourne, and I think that will make apartments very affordable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, there's 18,000 apartments under construction, there's the pipeline after that is significant. Whether they'll all go ahead remains to be seen. But if you're a first home buyer and you can get into an inner city market for half a mil.
500, yeah.
That's amazing affordability.
Compared to Sydney.
Compared to Sydney. And it's great. Like if you look at Melbourne CBD and you look at the types of workers that a lot of, employers want, they want young people. Yeah. And those young people can afford to live in the city. It's going to be great for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were saying before that you think there's going to be slowing of growth in 2017. What do you think is going to be some of the key elements that will slow that growth?
I really changed my outlook probably only over the last couple of weeks. Yep. So we track demand on our site. So we look at the number of people looking to buy versus listings. Yeah. And that peaked in October. So it really ramped up. Those 2 interest rate cuts really made a huge difference and it really peaked. In November, it stabilised. Yeah. And then we started to see a few other interesting things happen. Obviously, the banks started raising rates independently of the Reserve Bank. So it became tougher. It's going to become tougher, I think, for investors. Yep. But we also saw an increase in listings. So stabilisation, increase in listings, harder for investors to get into the market. So I think those three things combined, plus, we had the GDP drop in the September quarter. So I think that's impacting confidence a little bit.
Yeah, a bit of sentiment change.
Sentiment change. So I don't think things will drop. But I just think people, it just seems to be moderating a little bit. And I don't think it's a bad thing.
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I was at auction on Saturday in one of the best tree-lined streets in the inner west of Melbourne. Auction passed into me. I was the only bidder. And I can tell you, 4 weeks ago, no way would I have been the only bidder. It passed into me, I negotiated after auction. I haven't negotiated after auction for what seems like an eternity. Yeah. And yet this Saturday, now we're getting close to Christmas. People are buying shopping presents, I get that. But with all of the pent-up demand that happened through winter, I was really surprised by that. And then the indicative clearance rate in Melbourne is lower as well. So that's on the back of what you've just been talking about.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it kind of, you realise how frustrating it would be for buyers. That, at the same time we saw this surge in people wanting to buy, but then a drop in listings. that if you were looking at to buy, it would have been so frustrating. And what we think happened is, I think, because the market was so strong, a lot of upgraders decided not to sell.
I was going to ask you what you thought was that driver that slowed down listings.
Yeah. And
I think it was the fear of not being in the market and
FOMO.
not getting up. Yeah, great old FOMO. But all the upsizers sort of saying, well, if we sell, what are we going to buy? These properties are going crazy. So you had a bit of that evidence as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we obviously track listings to the nth degree, and we really try and get a handle of what's happening. And it seems like, if the market's too strong, people won't sell. If the market's too weak, people won't sell. So, you've kind of got this balance where, you don't want a market to collapse because everyone will sell and then you'll have nothing happening for decades, like Italy or the US or large parts of Europe. But at the same time, you don't want it too strong because people then back out of the market and really just are too nervous to transact.
Now, what evidence have you got from the investors who are maybe looking to cash out at the top of the cycle? Have you got anything in there that you can see in your data?
I mean, it's really I know it's a hard one. I mean, I think I think investing in property is the stability of investing in property is what makes people so attractive to people. Trying to pick the cycles, I think that is a pretty tricky thing to do. And I from my perspective, if I look at, say, Perth at the moment, Perth is heading to the bottom. And I think it's kind of there.
Pretty close.
Yeah, and I think, we're starting to see demand levels slightly return. Listings are increasing as well. And we're also seeing those inner suburban areas, those inner west suburbs starting to increase in price. So Perth, I kind of feel like it's near. I think those Sydney and Melbourne, because they're big cities and, they continue to grow and they've got economic growth, like it just seems that things will continue to be okay. And so I can't, I think growth will taper, but I can't see it, coming off or doing badly from that perspective.
I agree. I mean, if we look at the historical cycles, the last big cycle like this was 2001, 2003, and we actually saw the flood of stock that hit the market at the end of 2003 and into 2004 compounded the correction. Now, when we say it was correction, I think it went back -5. Now, we've had about 60-odd% growth in this cycle, 100% growth in Sydney, in fact, in this cycle. Just crazy numbers in some spots. And I think there is investors who maybe in their older age who are going, well, why would I sell now? It's just going to keep going up and up and up. So and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, it's not going up anymore. Clearance rates are slowing down. And then they all quickly try and put their properties on. They get a little bit greedy. They don't want to they want to try and pick the top. And that's when the flood of stock starts to come on. So I think there will be some buying opportunities if we do see the end of the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'll be more and more stock
and I think too, if you look at something like apartments in Melbourne, I think that's a really good example where there's just so much there and prices are coming off already. And, you probably could have got out maybe a year ago if you were looking to get out.
Yeah, true.
But I think too, that I think a lot of people tend to look at residential as one investment class. And, there's so many nuances. There's geographical differences. There's housing type differences. I mean, even in one suburb, you've got street differences. So, it's like comparing Facebook with BHP in some instances. And you wouldn't do that as an analyst, but then a lot of property, a lot of people that look at property and certainly the way that it's viewed as an asset class, people kind of assume they're the same.
Well, with that in mind, how do you guys drill down? I don't know how big the economics team is at REA, but how do you guys drill down on the bigger picture? Because everyone says, I don't buy Melbourne, and they're thinking apartments, but it's a big, broad market. What does a week or a day look like for the economics team at REA?
Yeah, so we have a big data analytics team, and we've got data scientists who do one thing. We've got data analytics team in all of our, our residential developer section, the commercial section. So there's a lot of people looking at data, collecting data. We use a lot of data from our site to get an idea as to what's happening. So, we can look at the most clicked house, for example. We can look at people looking to buy or rent, the number of people searching on our site and comparing to listings. So from that perspective, that's giving us some really interesting insights. So I guess one of them is a big drive for affordable locations at the moment. So Tasmania came up really high on our index. That Tasmania, a lot of people are looking to buy there. and comparably there's not many listings, but really that affordability would be a big driver there.
So they're not investors, they're actually owner-occupiers, or have you
We
drilled
can't
down?
tell necessarily, because you've got to think, like, if someone's searching,
Yep.
you know, they're not necessarily going
could
to be able
gawking
to.
or yep,
So
yep.
we don't know, but I mean, I think it would be a bit of both. I think,
Yep.
you know, if you're a young person in Sydney
Yep.
and you want to get into the market, but you want to live in Surrey Hills, you know, you're probably not going to be, you might be priced out,
Yep.
but you can rent in Surrey Hills because
Yep.
rents are cheap at the moment.
Yep.
So you can rent in Surrey Hills, you can buy probably an amazing house in Hobart.
Yeah, so Rentvest.
Rentvest.
Yep.
I mean, it's perfect. It's
Yep.
a perfect solution for a lot of people. So I mean, that's been really interesting in terms of popularity.
In terms of the data that you've been looking at, has there been any correlations that have surprised you? So if you're looking at, say, what's driving growth or value, is there any correlation in your data sets that you've looked at and thought, wow, that's a strong correlation there that you wouldn't have expected?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some interesting ones. I guess one of them is Central Coast has been a really interesting one. That Central Coast came up first in our fastest selling location. So, you know, a lot of the fastest selling in Australia was Central Coast. So that was interesting.
Days on market.
Days on market. And then we started to see Central Coast suburbs move up very quickly in rankings. So in our popularity rankings, so, you know, we look at the suburbs most clicked versus listings, and we saw this massive
Spike.
Spike. So that was interesting. But then what happened? We had a look at our commercial site. So we also have obviously Real Commercial.
Yeah, Real Commercial.
And we looked at the most popular locations for regional locations for office space.
Yep.
And then Central Coast came up again. So I think what's happening is we're getting a white collar migration from Sydney to that area because of lifestyle, affordability.
Yep.
You know, all those
Small
things.
businesses setting up there.
Yeah, they don't sign up for $1 million mortgage from, you know, 1.5 hour commute to work, do they?
No.
If they can go up there, they can get some lifestyle.
Yeah, you can get 700 grand and you can buy a house. And I think too that perhaps they go up there and, you know, they start commuting, but after a while, you know, they see an opportunity for business and then we're starting to see more activity there.
So was there a lead time in the commercial piece compared? Was there any trend in terms of, so 6 months out, you started to see an increase in inquiries on leasing these sort of small offices, and then the population came, or was it population first, then the leasing?
I don't know, because I've only been with the company eight months. But I mean, my view is that we tend to see people move, and then we see business growth because that kind of is the way it works. I mean, the other interesting trend that we've seen too is we had a look at the most commonly searched criteria on the site, and it came up as being 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2-car garage, 600 square metres.
And a pool.
I actually did the
Today Show.
I had to do the Today Show piece based on your data.
Oh, the pool was
pools,
interesting. Yeah, people love pools.
Granny flats.
But granny flats not in Melbourne. Like Melbourne, people are too cool for granny flats.
What was it? It was warehouse conversion in Melbourne. So thanks for that. I had to do a nice piece to camera on that.
Yeah, that was very funny.
Got the old Adam's apple out for that bit, didn't you?
So you didn't have to go in a pool. That was
which is all right. But all they did is start doing overlays of all these really nice pools. Because it was pool or pools, like, you know, you didn't collate it. Oh, it was very fun. Anyway, well, it was fun. You know, it was good. So here's that scarcity: 4 bed, 2 bath. You know, it is. You know, this is what we've been rabbiting on about on the podcast for how long, about scarcity, owner-occupier appeal, and 4 bed, 2 bath gives you so much flexibility, and they're scarcer. And the closer they are to the city, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some of the flats, we call them flats in Melbourne. So the apartments are new stuff, the flats are the old 70s style.
Yep.
Some of them in the Bayside of the the inner east, haven't done that great over the last little part of the cycle, despite the fact that houses and townhouses, and particularly in the inner west, have done really great. Do you have a view, based on the Sydney experience, about what that might look like for Melbourne? Because we've got this oversupply brand new product, but you've got this really wonderful product that's sitting in the leafy suburbs next to the beautiful houses with all the lifestyle that just hasn't performed. And surely the pressure for that sort of stuff has got to start mounting now that the prices have started to jump. Have you formed a view around that?
I mean, it's definitely uniqueness sells. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think we saw an analysis recently where they looked at Art Deco apartments and they outperformed everything else because they are unique and they're often in better locations. So I think that's another key factor. Yep. For that type of apartment stock, I think a lot of it's probably a little bit out of date at the moment, and I think perhaps people would be looking to newer stuff because of that. But definitely, you know, often they are better located. Often they can be bigger as well, so that can be a key selling factor as well. So I think, you know, longer term, many of them will do quite well. It's interesting though in Sydney, they've now changed the New South Wales strata laws. They've done a lot of changes to that. It hadn't been changed, I think, in 40 years. But one of them was that they, if you were, just say you owned one apartment in a 6-apartment block, and you and 4 of the other owners wanted to sell en bloc, and one person didn't want to, you effectively could force that person to sell. And I mean, it sounds pretty harsh, particularly if you're the person not wanting to sell. It's terrible, obviously.
You're in your 80s and it's...
and you're going to be forced out. So, I mean, obviously some personal problems there, but in terms of redevelopment, it is a good thing because Sydney being so undersupplied, if you can get these six apartment blocks, you can get a developer in to, you know, expand them out to 10 or 12 or, you know, really have better use of the land, then it is a really
Unlike the Chinese, they just basically say, right, this whole strip of the city, you're gone. We're building a 6-lane highway. You're like, well, wait a minute, we weren't really talking about selling. We really, bang, they just move them out and relocate them. And then the 6-lane highway gets built about 6 months later.
You've got a premier who doesn't build roads, though.
Don't start me on that. East-West Link, you're listening? Dan, you're listening? We need it. So... In terms of the categorisations that you use on the site, realestate.com.au, are you looking to change a few of those? So it's a bit frustrating, you know, how you've got all those different categories. If you can...
Don't be shy, mate.
Well,
no, I love it. We love that feedback.
Because, well, you've got apartments, flats, and I mean, it would be nice for people to understand the definitions because then the agents will correctly classify them. So you and I as analysts, and Bryce and all, we can actually sit back and actually make some more determinations on it because I've been rabbiting on forever that we need to analyse by property type by number of bedrooms, not necessarily by suburb. You know, these artificial boundaries are useless in a sense. They're created boundaries by a line on a road. Now, if you can actually wipe out those boundaries and just start to look at the composition type and the attributes of that we can do better analysis.
Yes.
So, you know, because you've got flat, apartment, townhouse, villa. Like if everyone knew what the definitions were and we had pictures to define them, it'd be even better for all of us and better for the agents because we can start to analyse it.
Yeah,
do you feed that up the line? I'm trying to help you out on your job here. I'm trying to help you out on your job.
We can actually, behind the scenes, we can do a bit more of that. You know, because we do get from the agents. Yeah.
They can incorrectly classify the property as well, let's be honest.
Yes.
You search for house and then there's an apartment that comes up. Cheeky agents putting their property in.
No, we can do that, Ben. Come on.
No, they do it, don't they?
Take us back pre-Colliers. What was the path for you to get into property in the first place? Where was the initial interest?
Yeah, so it was a bit of an accident. So I studied economics at uni and I went to work for Ian Harper, and he's obviously now doing different things, but he was at the Melbourne Business School at the time. So got a job there and worked for a year as his research assistant. And then I got offered a job in Canberra, in Department of Transport, NAB. I was getting quite final with National Australia Bank, and then got offered a job at a company called Jeb Holland Damasi. And at the time, you know, it was still in Melbourne. They were at number 1 Collins Street. You know, I was like, wow, this is so cool.
This is cool. Seduced by the building.
A really great company. So I went into property there. They obviously consult a lot to, at the time, to shopping centre owners. And again, it was such a great, you know, start to my career because in the early 90s, it was, you know, people just were losing jobs left, right and centre. Yeah. But I got to travel around Australia looking at shopping centres and... it was
not a bad
fun.
thing.
Yeah.
My wife would probably enjoy that one.
And from
they weren't always the best shopping centres, but you know.
Off there to Colliers?
No, so then I was in consulting for about a decade, and then got a job with JLL, and ended up heading up their strategic consulting division. Stayed with them for 6 years, and then got offered the role at Colliers to head up the research team, and had a great time there as well. So I was there for 6 years. Ended up last year doing a lot around Asia as well. And great. Really got to learn those markets well, and went on to REA.
And obviously there's a big difference between how commercial property is valued and the real focused on per square metre of usage space and utilisation and efficiencies of that, you've now moved into residential property where all of that sort of goes out the window, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, what was the big transition for you, or what was when you were looking at the data and you're thinking, I can't see as clear? I mean, I used to work for Voyages Hotels and Resorts, which was part of Lend Lease and one of those other big mobs. And all we used to do was have to value the resorts out at Ayers Rock every year, because that's how they got their return on investment for their REITs, their real estate investment trusts. Now you're in residential side. What has been the difference in the nuances and trying to study that?
I guess the speed of market, commercial, you go from 1 month to 2 months later and things haven't really changed. And so you kind of, as a researcher, it was harder to think of angles. Yeah. So that was different. Whereas in Resi, there's just so much going on. It can change from week to week and you can get new insights. And also working at REA, we're just bombarded by so much data that kind of sifting through it can really give us some interesting insights.
And it's real-time data too.
And it's real-time. Yeah. So that's been interesting. I think too, commercial too, that the investment universe is so much smaller as well. So in terms of the number of people interested in it, it's kind of harder to sort of think of some interesting insights. And also that there's fewer investors as well. So it's really easy to track that you know exactly how much money is coming from China. You know exactly how much money is leaving Australia to buy stuff overseas. And you know the vacancy rate to the 0.00nth degree. There's lots and lots of detail that really with Resi, there's lots of information in Australia, but it's very fast moving.
Well, that's an important point, because you've got to be across the whole of Australia, and you think, it's not just the capitals that are doing different things. You've got the regionals, and then you've got mining, and you've got some manufacturing. So that's a lot for you to stay abreast of as well.
Yeah, it is, but what's interesting though is there kind of a lot of trends that happen, and a trend in, Central Coast coming up in Sydney. In Melbourne, the equivalent was kind of around the Dandenongs upway. That kind of was acting in the same way as Sydney, as Central Coast. And then also there's that two-speed element as well. So it's kind of, Sydney, Melbourne versus the rest of Australia has there's obviously that's kind of a key theme that keeps running through.
Now in commercial, the way in which it's also analysed or collapsed into bigger observations is you've got your A class, B class and C class floor space. And, so if you go to a presentation on commercial, there'll be something like, currently in Melbourne, we have 6,800 or 68,000 square metres of A-grade floor space that's let, and there's 2,800. Now, do you see residential property being graded in a similar way, where we talk about blue chip, we talk about, green chip, so gentrifying areas, we talk about that type of thing. Do you think that there will be some insights that you guys will start to look at where you do have that sort of A grade, B grade, C grade classifications?
Not at the moment. At the moment, we're kind of looking more around the suburbs where we're seeing far more buyers than listings, or far more people wanting to rent than listings, or even people wanting to share. We're able to now look at the number of people wanting to share compared to listings. So we're kind of, from our perspective, it's more around the consumer demand piece, because that's our edge, I guess, that we have that information. Even things like, number of Chinese looking to buy, where are they looking and what suburbs are they wanting, and are they moving up and down, or are they changing the type of property that they're looking at? So, unless kind of that property council kind of classifications, or the shopping centre council, they've been very good in classifying those sorts of things.
Very good.
You mentioned before that you've changed your analysis in the last couple of weeks. Are you happy to talk about the R word, or are you like the politicians who don't want to entertain the thought of the second running quarter of negative GDP?
Yeah, look, it was interesting. There was an article in, I think it was The Age over the weekend, and they were talking about, things went backwards in September quarter. It may go backwards December quarter, and if it does, we are in a technical recession. But they made the point, and it's a really valid point, is that it's not like, you're looking at you're not looking at your friends and they're losing their jobs, or people are still getting pay rises. People seem relatively comfortable in their jobs.
Consumer spending's all right.
Consumer spending's okay. So everything else is kind of okay. I think, and we've got room to move with interest rates. So, I think we're quite unique from a global perspective, that we can still keep reducing our interest rates if things continue to go, if we start to see GDP slow again. So, I'm not as concerned. I think obviously watching GDP. I think probably more so for the housing sector is really watching that unemployment rate, because really if that starts to rise and people start to become more challenged in paying off their loans, I think that's when things could go bad.
So do you feel that we will get a second quarter?
I don't think so. I'd be surprised.
Do you guys track inflation? Does your team?
Yeah, no,
inflation?
I mean, we obviously keep an eye on it.
Yep.
So inflation, it's been interesting actually, because I do go to Reserve Bank economic analysis team, have a regular lunch, and in which they explain what they're thinking. And it's interesting because their outlook for inflation is to remain low and below target until early 2018.
Correct.
So I think from that perspective, low inflation rate's probably not going to trigger a cut.
Yep.
I think, another GDP decline will. A rise in unemployment will. They're the sorts of things that they'll be looking at.
Or a collapse or a deflationary pressure, that will absolutely.
Or if things suddenly move very, very quickly and change very quickly, I think that will start to.
Have the RBA reached out to you guys for some data? I mean, they're obviously concerned about the residential price growth that we've had. Low cash, low access to, or easy access to, easy cash. Obviously you get asset bubbles as part of that. Have they got any views, or have they reached out to you guys for some
it's
insights?
interesting. I mean, they would, the last lunch I went to, they said, from our perspective, things slowed this year from where they were last year, from a growth perspective. And, but I think from their perspective, if you have a look at Perth in particular, and you look at Melbourne, Sydney, it's so different as to what's happening. And there's really, looking at some of the unemployment stats in some suburbs of Perth now, you're getting in excess of 25% unemployment rate. So, I think one of the issues with interest rates is that the housing market is so highly correlated, but at the same time, the Reserve Bank are making these decisions to grow the economy.
Yeah.
And the housing is one part of that.
Which is their problem child.
It's a problem child. Which is
with separate problems, because like you say, whatever they do to affect Melbourne and Sydney, poor old Perth is going to go, come on, give us a leg up.
It's a bit of a Do we want to do a fly rant? A quick fly rant, just to get some views on some different markets.
Yeah,
so we'll start Brizzy. Any views on Brizzy?
Yeah, Brisbane medium demand market. I think as that economy grows, that'll continue to do okay. More positive Gold Coast keeps coming up. So I'm not a huge fan of the Gold Coast because it's so boom bust, but Gold Coast at the moment is coming up high on our rental demand.
Massively.
So it's
Sunny Coast. What about
Gold Coast? So there's only one way to go.
Yeah, so it's this huge rental demand, and I think it's just again young people, lifestyle, jobs, tourism, Commonwealth Games.
There's fool's gold in terms of the economic. What do you call it? The Olympic, the Commonwealth Games, because quite often that can generate some demand, but that doesn't hang around. Like I was in Perth in 1987 when the America's Cup came, and they built all this stuff. And then all of a sudden the America's Cup went, and then there was all these white elephant stuff.
Yeah, we've lived through Commonwealth Games here in Melbourne a couple of times, and on Olympics and
big city though.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a smaller city.
Well, they talked about it with Sydney too, and other than the infrastructure program.
I know you're saying Fremantle's massive. I know. I know.
Sunshine Coast. Anything coming up?
Yeah, similar. So similar. Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast seem quite similar. I think Brisbane housing far better. Brisbane apartments, obviously, lots coming out of the ground. And I think that's creating a bit of a problem, but housing continues to be very high in demand. Apartments kind of a bit more
just on Brizzy, do you see the medium to long term in Brisbane changing for apartments? Because they, I grew up in Perth, so Perth and Brisbane were always, if you're going to invest, you invest in a house, and Melbourne and Sydney, if you're going to be in the best areas, quite often it was an apartment. But Brisbane, with their expected growth in terms of populations, and they're going to have some commute challenges like Melbourne and Sydney does. They're quite blessed at the minute, but they need another bridge that crosses the river to get them over to the south. So as congestion increases in that city, we've got a view, a medium to long term view that the right style, we call them flats, in the right areas have to grow in demand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Brisbane probably would have done better if they hadn't built so much. And it's a common problem in Queensland that they kind of doing quite well, and then suddenly someone just goes, bang, I'm going to put, 200, 300, 400, apartments in. So
it's very easy to get a stamped approval up there.
It's only one council.
I don't think they have a problem with that. We need more people working. Okay, there's 300 apartments. Yeah, we'll whack another 400 there. Put it away. Put the approval stamp away for us for a while, please. going to be some people who lose money.
The crane driver can just use two buildings at once.
Now, come down. Any views on Ballina and Byron?
Byron. I mean, I love Byron, but not particularly.
We're all like, but
Have a
for
good
property,
beer,
okay, so we'll move on
I'd buy a house
from
if I could afford one. But
Costs? Any views on
No,
costs?
not particularly. I mean, look, regional areas, you know, if you've got a good economy, if you've got something driving it, if you're not seeing lots and lots of development, can do pretty well. And I suppose if you're looking regional areas, on the water is always going to be better than inside.
Which would be then one of your better regional picks? Like, is Newcastle up on in the mix? Or
Newcastle's good. I mean, obviously Central Coast is great. Obviously Wollongong, anything kind of
Shell Harbour way
from those areas.
Any other regional port? Geelong?
Geelong, because that's commutable.
Geelong's commutable. It's anywhere you can get good public transport, good schools. I mean, again, you know, looking at what people search for, the places that seem to have the most engagement have, you know, access to good retail, good schools, good public transport. And they actually don't care.
Train, not anything else, isn't it?
Sydney people don't
Come
mind
on,
buses.
mate, you love a tram. You love a good tram ride.
People in Perth get on buses and trams. Don't start me on the trams.
I know,
down
when
here in
people
Melbourne.
get lost on buses, don't they?
We just
Yeah,
don't. Do we use them? Have you ever
use the train.
been on a bus in Melbourne? Oh, anyway.
Oh, not you. But Perth people, your safety used to be in trouble if you jumped on a train in Perth in the old days. Now it's fine. They got it down the middle of the freeway. You know, it's safe. But it was. You'd go when I was growing up. You go, well, no, we won't get on the train because we'll probably get beat up. That's a true story.
So we talked about Melbourne and Sydney, so I think we've done them enough. Let's move around. Hobart, Tassie.
Yeah, Tassie's good. I mean, it is so affordable, and I think you know what? I mean, it's interesting. Just Mona, that impact of Mona has had to the confidence in that.
Well, just the whole wharf area there is just really nice, and I went down there and had a look around a while back. And
side story: one of the clients. Remember, we had the premiere of my show a couple of years ago, and it was the young couple who came and they bought in Hampton. They recently just sold that house for $400,000 more than they bought it 3 years later.
Wow!
And so
there's a living in that.
So he could take up the role as the marketing manager at Mona in Tasmania. So he's now buying a big sprawling estate.
We've got a great client down there who has it down there, and he goes, I've just been for a surf. It's like, well, obviously he has to have a steamer on because the water's a bit cold down there.
Shout out to Sandy.
Sandy. It's just really, it's a different way to live, isn't it? And 5 minutes to work.
Yes, amazing.
What about when you bring
cold?
What about when you bring interstate money into Hobart?
Yes.
And so you could get interstate driving of price, but it's still the locals that got to have a job to rent it.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, I think. Mm-hmm. I think yields have been kind of okay in Hobart, but if you do see lots of not offshore money, but this time it's local, interstate money coming in, then it can make a difference to price.
Because that's always in the back of my mind with Hobart, because we can bring a whole heap of interstate money down there, but if we then create big vacancy rates and the locals can't keep the job, or because forestry, tourism, retail, there's no
and not strong income growth.
No, and it's like, I think it's 50% government employment, so you're not exactly.
500,000 people on the whole island. It's not as if they're getting massive growth. So.
Yeah.
Let's go to Adelaide.
Yeah, Adelaide's great.
Yes.
Like, I really think it's doing well. I think, it's so affordable. It's amazing. Like, it's, we have every week on Sky, we look at the most clicked properties.
Yep.
And a few weeks ago, one came up in Glenelg, and it was a 1-bedroom apartment, but it was like a block from the beach for $450,000.
There you go.
So it was tiny, but it was right near the beach in a pretty good suburb.
What are you paying in Sydney for that? Late sevens,
early
eights, 1 million if it's a shoe. If it's a nice big floor plan, but crazy.
But Adelaide pretty good. I mean, again, Adelaide, it's always where you're looking in Adelaide, and so I think that sort of southwest, northwest kind of.
Yeah, it's a great little city. It's about 25 years.
So what does Perth need? Obviously, they've suffered from the mining downturn. What do they need over there for their property market?
I mean, I suppose.
But it's how
I'm only joking.
I mean, I think Perth will recover eventually, and you've got to remember it's still growing. So it's just the growth has gone from 9% to like 1%. So it's just this massive slowdown.
Yeah.
There's been migration out of Perth, so that will probably help the unemployment rate, sadly, but that will help. It won't help the housing market. I think, though, for the housing market, the challenge is that there was still a lot of development taking place as Perth was slowing down. So
Yeah.
not only did you have an economic slowdown, but you also had this huge amount of supply entering the market.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I think Perth, again, if you have a look, Perth is declining in price, but if you have a look at some of those inner west suburbs, they're actually increasing in price and have increased by 15% over the past 12 months.
There you go, markets within markets.
Mate,
There's always markets within markets.
There's always
you
markets
always
within
think
markets.
inner west is your gentrifying, but inner west in Perth, that's that's Blue Ribbon.
Yeah,
It
that's
is
Blue
Ribbon
Ribbon.
country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mind
it's
you,
always
some
like
of the-
buying the best property in any city. You're
Yeah.
probably going to be okay.
Now, well, let's wrap it up with Darwin.
Mm.
We got any views on Darwin?
Yeah, so Darwin's tracking where we're seeing Perth
Yeah.
from a demand perspective. I think Darwin's harder though than Perth from a long term. So I
Yeah.
think being far smaller
Significantly smaller. Yeah.
and
Seasonal workforce.
yeah, it's just much more challenging. So
Yeah.
I think Perth will probably recover quicker
Yep.
than where we're seeing Darwin.
And just so we don't forget the Canberrans.
Oh, the Canberrans, of course, our little friends, our
But
nation's capital.
that's an overflow, impact of Sydney as well. Ben and I have talked about, we went there and we had a look to run a ruler over for investors, but they've got this damn land tax from day one. There's no threshold. You've got to pay it
Right.
straight away.
And it's
expensive, yeah.
So we're giving up all our rent to basically fund all of their amazing schools and their lake and all of their facilities and all their infrastructure and their roundabouts. How many roundabouts? And their roundabouts are about 180 metres wide. Seriously,
Bigger than Queensland.
They don't even need to make them that big. The roundabout, it could be 5 minutes on a roundabout in that joint. Just kidding. All our friends there in our nation's capital got some of the best infrastructure going around. And that's where it's going. It's coming from us property
The land
investors who are
tax.
paying the land tax.
Well,
And
the,
it's not
the
even a
agents are
state.
reporting that there's not a lot. Most of the inquiry is from owner-ocs. They're not
Yeah.
getting a lot of investor inquiries.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting you're talking about investors in Canberra, that renters are really stuck for properties. That we've, it's really challenging for people to rent in that city.
So what's really happened? So the absorption of those medium density apartments on the foreshore there, they are all starting to get renters in them because there's really no other choice. So it's going to have a terrific rental yield, but unfortunately we're just giving it all to the government. So drop your land tax and we'll help you build more houses. Pretty simple.
Make it more affordable.
So 2017, as we sort of get to the pointy end, what can the listeners take away in terms of overall confidence in the Australian property market? Probably sort of the minutiae is there's lots of sort of noise, but the medium to long term, what's your view going forward in our markets?
Okay, so I think it'll be a good year, but it won't be an amazing year. So I think this year we saw so much price growth, and it really outperformed. If you're an investor or even an owner, you did very well. So next year I think will be different, and I think part of it will be the banks will be potentially still increasing rates to investors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to slow down lending, which is what they're trying to do. So that may impact on investor confidence a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the banks won't increase rates to such an extent that they stop the flow of funds, because then that's also not in their interests as well. So, so I think that will probably moderate the market a lot. Economic growth, though, is far more uncertain, and it will depend a lot on what happens with the global economy. And, Trump coming in, Brexit, we've had, what's happening in Italy with the banks, what we're happening in France. Like, there's just so much going on. And Australia looks amazing at the moment, and it does look like a safe haven. And we've had 25 years of economic growth now, and we've got room to move on interest rates. There's lots of really positives about Australia, but we will get caught up. If things go very wrong, we will get caught up. So, at the moment, I'm really watching Trump very closely, and, I think a lot of his policies are okay, but then some of the trade things worry me a bit. So we'll depend a lot on that. But, at the moment, if the US continues to fire, Europe's not going to fire, but as long as Europe stays kind of stable, I think, Australia will do okay next year. And again, we've got that room for movement for interest rates, so that'll be good for housing.
So any new insights that you're going to release in 2000? Can you give us any sneak peeks in terms of what realestate.com.au are going to do in regards to some insights?
Yeah, so we've been publishing now at the area. We've been doing our demand index now for the last few months. So looking at where looking at how the behaviour of buyers on our site is changing over time.
So we subscribe to realestate.com.au.
You just go on our site.
Yep.
So we've got a news section on our site, and we do put a lot of the insights on there.
Fantastic. That's good.
So, I mean, are there any stats that consumers should go and target, that you think that is an underutilised free resource that they have on your site that they're not using?
We've got tons of resources on our site. I mean, one of them is Invest.
Yeah.
So you can go on there and see where the highest returns are. You can do it by bedroom type. You can do it by suburb. You can do it by state. There's lots of information there. There's another one that we have which looks at, if you are looking in, say, Bondi and you can't afford Bondi, it'll give you some options of kind of similar areas to Bondi as well. So there's lots of really clever things that our guys do on a site that can help people in their journey.
So you're clearly working for a good company. Well done.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but
Global leader.
Well.
Global leader in real
leader,
estate search
yes.
and research. Fantastic.
Well, that's been terrific. We've,
We
I
can
just
keep
looked,
chatting.
I just looked at the time.
45 minutes,
I've got 1,000 questions to go, but we'll maybe get you on again next year.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But we certainly appreciate you coming onto the couch this side of Christmas to give the listeners some great intel for their planning for next year, Ben.
Phenomenal. Thanks very much, Nerida.
Yeah.
Thanks
Really
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
It was
Really
pleasure.
great.
Now, you're probably not aware of this, but for the
Stop laughing.
for the last 90
This is very professional.
for the last 94
I spend
episodes,
a lot of time on this, mate.
Ben and I lose credibility at this point. Me by default.
Yeah.
Because
he's caught up in the
Ben signs off
whirlwind of this
around the.
sign-off.
Do you have any second languages?
A little bit of German. I've got a German mother.
Oh, right.
But don't speak it
But
very well, sadly.
I've done the Auf Wiedersehen. Is there anything
Is
else?
that it?
Can we
Auf Wiedersehen. Yeah.
Can we use anything else? So I
probably
normally
better.
say goodbye in a foreign language, and I've just got this little cheat sheet in front of me, and I pick it up pretty much now. And I have a
How
quick
many
look.
times do I tell him not to do the magic of show business? Don't tell about your sheep off the top of your
There's
head.
not much magic here. Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
But mate, where are we going?
We're going Welsh. Welsh today.
Okay.
They've got this really strange accent, so I really don't know how.
Oh, you're already.
I'm just
you're
trying
already
to
in
warm
there.
up to it.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that, Scottish?
Okay.
I don't know.
Bocce.
The Welsh talk like Scots.
Bocce.
Bocce. All right.
Bocce. I don't know. Bocce.
There we go.
This is how bad it is. So everyone's actually stopped listening to what's going
Yeah, they fast forward this
It's just like next week.
But again, the Chief Economist at the REA Group, Nerida Conisbee, it's been a pleasure having you on the couch. And Ben, until next week.
Bocce.
Botchki. See you, folks.